In this video, I'm going to show you how to make a super easy halter top. For this project, you're going to need fabric. I went with something non-stretch, elastic, pins, scissors, thread, and measuring tape. We're going to start by draping the bust pieces of the top. You can do this on a mannequin or you can do this on yourself. I also like to do this with a scrap piece of fabric. And with our fabric lying flat, we're going to really roughly cut out a shape, making sure the fabric wraps around the back of the neck and fits around the bust. We're going to continue to cut this piece of fabric until we like the way that it's fitting. Then we're going to create a single dart underneath the bust. Then with a pen, we're going to mark out the edges of this piece, making sure to mark out where our center back is. And we're also going to mark out the placement and length of our dart. And here I decided I just wanted to take it a little more in the front. And here we're going to take our scissors and cut around the line that we just created, leaving a 1 centimeter seam allowance around every edge. The bigger the dart, the more volume you can fit in your top, and the smaller the dart, the smaller the chest. And now we're going to take that piece that we just cut and use it as our pattern to cut out our real fabric pieces. It's important that we cut these pieces out on the bias. We're going to cut out 4 pieces, 2 of which are going to be mirror images if your fabric isn't the same on both sides. Then we're going to place the mirror image of each piece right sides together and sew along the edges, leaving the top and the bottom open. And we're just going to sew that with 1 centimeter and a regular straight stitch. I like to cut away the excess fabric to reduce the bulk. And then we're going to flip these pieces right sides out. And then we're going to iron those pieces nice and flat. Then I'm going to fold in 1 centimeter seam allowance at the top of the halter, and I'm going to iron that down. Then looking at the bottom of the halter, we're going to fold down our dart and then do the same technique by folding in 1 centimeter of the seam allowance and tucking it in. So now we have our dart on both layers of the top folded over and ironed down, and then we have the seam allowance of 1 centimeter tucked in between the layers. And then you're going to iron that and pin that all in place. And then you're going to do the exact same for the other side of the top. Now you have the 2 top pieces of your halter. Now to create the bottom part of the top, we want to measure for the front side seam to side seam. Then we're going to measure the length of the top, starting from just under the bust. Then in the back, we're just going to measure from side seam to side seam because we're going to use the same length measurement. Now we're going to cut out 2 rectangles. So keeping in mind seam allowance, we're going to cut the length measurement and the width measurement of the front piece of our top, and then we're going to do the same for the back. And then I'm going to sew these 2 edges wrong sides together because I'm going to do a front seam for a clean finish. I'm then going to trim away the fabric on both of the seams and flip the piece inside out. And then I'm going to sew my second stitch for my front seam. Now we have the bottom of the top with its 2 front side seams. Now we're going to create our elastic channel at the top using that excess seam allowance. We're going to fold over our fabric 1 centimeter and then fold it over again the width of the elastic plus 0.5 centimeters. Then we're going to create the hem on the other side of the fabric, so folding that over 1 centimeter and then folding it over another centimeter. For the hem, we can just sew that with a regular straight stitch. As for the channel, when sewing, we want to leave open a gap at either side seam to be able to insert our elastic. After sewing, we're now ready to insert the elastic. I like to do this with a safety pin to help me push it through the channel. It's up to you how tight you want the elastic to be, so pin it in place and try it on. Now is also a good time to pin the bust pieces to the bottom of the top and test out how they fit. I just pinned together the halter pieces around the neck because I'm going to make adjustments to that later. Right now is just seeing if the elastic fits comfortably and if you like the spacing and placement of the bust pieces. My bust pieces were slightly big, so I repinned them by leaving a little bit extra fabric at the bottom of the top, which I'll deal with in a later step. As for now, I'm just going to sew along where I pinned. This next step is only if you made any alterations to your bust. I'm just going to cut away the extra fabric and then fold it back in and sew everything down. And then I'm going to pin it back in place right along the existing seam. You're going to pin your own pieces along the existing seam as well, even if you don't cut away any extra fabric. So we're going to do our second stitch now along the existing seam to keep our bust pieces in place. Now we're ready to lock in our elastic by sewing a zigzag stitch along the edge and then closing up the 2 holes in our channel. And then you can cut away all the loose threads. Okay, the final step is to create the elastic bit at the back of the neck of the halter that makes it comfortable to wear. We're going to cut a 10 centimeter in length piece that's the same width plus seam allowance as your straps. And we're going to cut 2 of these pieces. Then we're going to place these pieces right sides together and sew along the 2 longer edges. Then we're going to flip it right side out and iron it down. Then we're going to insert our elastic and pin it down on one side. And then scrunch it up and pin it down on the other side. We're now ready to insert it onto our top, and this is when we may want to make length adjustments. So we're just going to pin it down and then try it on. If you need to shorten your straps in order to make this fit, you can cut away as much as you need to. If we did cut any away, we're going to refold in our seam allowance 1 centimeter and then insert this little piece of fabric covered elastic, tucking it into our straps. Adding in this little elastic strip is going to make it so our top fits comfortably. And then we're going to sew along where we pinned once we're sure we like the way it fits. And we're going to sew this with a zigzag stitch. And you're all done. Thank you so much for watching, and if you liked this video, please subscribe.